Hey guys, Akio Murasak here. Today I have a lot of things to cover, a lot's been happening recently, but today I kind of want to focus mostly on empathy, on reality and the ability to distinguish reality from fiction, and the kind of dialogue that has been building up for the last 15 years actually, where a very specific, extremely left-leaning group of people have been deciding on what's called rules of engagement, how we're supposed to conduct ourselves, especially online and in media circles, and what is politically and socially acceptable. And they've been building this up, they've been defining the rules of engagement for the last, I would right now say, almost 15 years. But there is a problem. They very often break those rules, and those rules typically don't make a lot of sense. Now, what I'm talking about here specifically is the latest situation of John Davidson, a Tourette syndrome sufferer, a person with an actual real life, I want to really emphasize this here, real life disability, who was at the BAFTA to celebrate awards he received for his movie I Swear, which was a movie about a person suffering from the same condition he is suffering. He's also a very vocal advocate for people with the Tourette syndrome and for people with disabilities. And the interesting situation at BAFTA is that people were celebrating the movie, people were congratulating for the movie until an incident happened. John had an actual tic, he had a fit, and he said the N-word. And right after he said the N-word, and there was a series of apologies, but right after that, online, there was an absolute storm of people, especially Black Americans, who now decided that there is an order of victimhood, an order of who gets to call the shots in our modern society. So apparently John is so unfortunate to be white, and therefore he is not permitted to say the N-word, regardless whether he has a disability or not. That is completely irrelevant to a lot of these people because he's white and they're black. And so a lot of people, especially on Twitter, suddenly kind of outed themselves as not only not knowing where Scotland is, not knowing that Scotland and Ireland are in fact two different countries, and the fact that a man in Scotland is able to nose the N-word, which is being continuously repeated on both TV, in movies, in music, in rap, yes, by black people. In fact, he knows the N-word, and he was able to use it, yes, because he knows, because he has heard the N-word. But apparently for a lot of people, all of these things are completely new. And on top of this, there is apparently another John Davidson in Australia who's a sports commentator, and that person also got a lot of stink, a lot of flack on Twitter because he had the same name. Yes, and he was literally forced. He made like a silly apology, but he was literally forced by people to apologize for something he has not done. And you know what they told him? You should apologize because it's easier. Yeah, this is 2026, this is the society we got to participate in, and this is a culmination of the last 15 years of creating a hierarchy of victimhood, of creating a social compass of how people are allowed and not allowed to interact with each other. And I'm just going to read this one post here from an article which is very exceptionally accurate. But the furor over the matter has exposed the vicious underbelly of many in an industry chants the mantra of diversity and kindness, and empathy, in fact, another thing I want to talk about. It seems that there are limits to those characteristics and a hierarchy which some folk are less equal than others. Is it not familiar to you, the phrase? Have you read, perhaps, Animal Farm? Have you read it? Some animals are less equal than others, but all animals are equal. That is exactly the phrase, and that unfortunately is the reality of Animal Farm and also of 1984 that we come to live in the year 2026. Davidson's neurological disability comes down the pecking order, it seems. Only an industry located so firmly up its own backside, meaning up its ass, could gather to honor a film illustrating the grim realities facing someone living with Tourette's, and then be so publicly aggrieved when the actuality of that illness and the involuntary nature of its effect on those suffering from it reveals itself in their midst. That is exactly what happened. I chose a couple of comments here I want to highlight because they're absolutely beautiful. We have this one here. Someone points out, like, how is having a disability an excuse to use a racial slur in a public place, involuntary or not? You all baffle me. Well, the thing is, if it's involuntary, that person does not get to choose whether they want or do not want to use a racial slur, whether it is or is not a public space, because it's involuntary. That is Tourette syndrome. And you see, if you took, I would say, 5 seconds out of your life to inform yourself about this, you might have learned something, but instead you clowned on yourself and you embarrassed yourself in front of millions of people. By the way, this is the real face on Twitter, so congratulations, self-doxing on top of everything. And then someone replied, do you understand what involuntary means? He has zero control over it. It's like being angry at a person with no legs because they can't walk. See, now I believe that 174 thoughts per minute here has made a mistake because they made a facsimile, they made a metaphor. Now that person unfortunately is too stupid to understand what a metaphor is or how metaphors work. To which they replied, well, if the person who can't walk used a racial slur multiple times in a public place, yeah, I'd be upset at them to your point. Well, the point is that you missed it. Anyway, here another person, this one's absolutely lovely. Another person, Dave here. Dave, please take 5 seconds out of your life, go to the internet, learn what Tourette syndrome is. You might come out a better person after this. But we have Dave E here. So a person with Tourette's murders or rapes people and says it was due to their disability. That is not how Tourette syndrome works. And you would know, again, if you spend 5 seconds out of your life. They should be let go without any punishment. Want to make sure that is that you are saying, as that could be their tick, right? No, Dave. No, that is not how Tourette syndrome works. So no, that would not have been their tick, in fact. I'm sorry to tell you this. I'm sorry that you're learning this the hard way on the internet, embarrassing yourself in front of millions of people. But maybe you learned something today. I really do hope, but I also doubt. Now, the reason why I'm talking about all of this is because, as I said, this is a culmination of people failing to find basic human empathy in themselves. Now, why do I say empathy in this case? Not everyone needs to know what Tourette syndrome is specifically, but I think basic human decency requires all of us that we can at least put ourselves in the shoes of a person who has a lifelong, incurable disability and is not actually able to sometimes control how they verbalize themselves. Now, I don't want to brag here, but as someone who has at least some empathy and who did experience a friend who had a very, very mild, I have to say, in comparison, version of Tourette's, I do understand this a little better, but in general, I can imagine the horrors this person had to go through growing up, existing, being in a society, especially in a society that online constantly preaches kindness, diversity, inclusion, but is actually factually super ableist towards people with real disabilities. And I can imagine myself, and I would absolutely forgive someone for saying the no N-word, because I can imagine, I can emphasize with that person. I understand this is not a common feature, and I see hundreds of people on Twitter who are failing, well, they're also failing the breakfast question. I don't think they can imagine themselves not having breakfast because they had breakfast, because that's the typical response from all of these sub 80 IQ individuals. But the reason why I'm also talking about this is because I want to cycle back a little bit to gaming and gaming culture, where we have a very similar problem. Maybe not as dramatic, but a very similar problem. We have the problem of, well, lack of empathy, but also a certain what is and is not allowed. We are now talking about Resident Evil, the newest one, Resident Evil Requiem, and the character of Leon F. Is it F or S? Sorry, I forgot now. Leon Kennedy, who of course is amazingly hot, but that's not the problem here. Because you see, in a world where male character in a video game, I want to emphasize a fictional setting, is allowed to be attractive, a female character in the same setting is not allowed to be attractive because it's sexualizing. Okay? Try to follow. Sexualizing men. Being vocal about sexualizing men is socially acceptable. Sexualizing women is not socially acceptable. Congratulations for building this complete uneven social structure throughout the last 15 years. It makes no sense, and we have every right to protest right now. Either both are fine or neither is fine. You pick one, and this is the same case with the N-word. If you don't want people to be using the N-word, either offensively or accidentally by having the disability, stop using the N-word. You do not have a mandate on using the N-word simply because you are black. You are in fact not more of a victim being an affluent black person such as Jamie Foxx compared to a white person with a lifelong crippling disability. You are in fact not more of a victim. Please finally understand this. And there are also articles like this one from Kotaku, again, frobbing over Leon S. Kennedy. My bad. I just want to read this one because it's absolutely glorious. After playing for Requiem twice, I can confidently say that those women at Capcom succeeded are God's strongest soldiers and allies to the gay community. Leon has been one of my favorite video game crushes since 2005, when I was drawn to his fine as hell character design in Resident Evil 4, yeah I do remember, long before I knew I was gay. And my god, Requiem manages to effortlessly capture his sensual aura and swagger in every motion. His reload animations, sexy. His violent kills that should make me recoil in disgust, I am swooning. His stupid dad joke quips at every horrifying thing he witnesses and experiences, which should be just as repulsive as the way he kicks a zombie's man head open against a brick wall. My pants are already gone. And I will not continue because this is absolutely disgusting. If you cannot imagine yourself, or if you cannot imagine a world where it would be as permissive to talk like this about a female game character, you probably should not be making comments like this about a male game character because both are inappropriate. I understand that in 2005 you had your magical gay awakening, but not everyone needs to know about this in 2026, and especially not if you're writing a review for a gaming magazine. Go on go on Tumblr, go on Reddit, go on Tinder, or better yet Grindr, and tell everyone about your magical awakening of 2005 with Leon S. Kennedy, and probably a body pillow of Leon S. Kennedy. That's completely fine, but please, for the love of God, do not write articles like this, because the level of hypocrisy in this one, absolutely through the roof. It's absolutely over 9,000. And of course, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that this exact same person is, on one hand, loving the furry, loving the gay stuff, loving the jiggle physics and the dongs and the balls in Baldur's Gate 3, and the bears, of course, because, you know, you gotta multitask. But any slightly sexy woman in a game, No, you can't have that, sir. The boobs, they're no. The boobs are verboten. They're not allowed. I'm sorry, okay? Yeah, this is the world we live in. I just want to finish up with this one, though, from Polygon, because this one's probably, in a way, the star of the show. So the article itself here is maybe not as bad, but dear Lord. The opening paragraph, you're just going to see for yourself. I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to learn a little bit about, you know, a certain Japanese word. It's going to be a learning lesson for us here. Yeah, so last year marked the 80th anniversary of the atomic bombings on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It doesn't sound right. I mean, it was last year, it's not this year, okay? Something so barbaric feels like it should have happened centuries ago, and yet it's still recent enough that tens of thousands of survivors still live among us today, known as hibakusha. These individuals still carry with them the physical and mental scars of an unfathomable tragedy. They are both reminders of the evil mankind is capable of and living proof that, against all odds, good people can still hope to push on in the face of it. Now, this paragraph itself, I don't have a problem with it. It's true. It was a tragedy. And the way, for instance, Japanese people look at it, it's they don't hate Americans, for instance. The majority of them don't hate Americans. They don't blame them. They understand that it was a consequence of a certain time in history. They learn about this very early on. Sometimes they're hammered even by correctly looking at the situation. But they do not blame Americans specifically. They don't blame the entire nation. They don't blame even the current culture about it. However, they are fairly sensitive about the topic online, and they don't like memes about, you know, nuclear explosions. Like, these are fairly inappropriate in Japan. However, the opening of the second paragraph, so you're drawing this entire notion of an actual real-life tragedy, and then you're continuing with, in his own world, Leon S. Kennedy is a survivor too. Yes, he is a survivor, but in a fictional setting. It's in a computer game. And the stuff he went through is on a completely different scale than what happened to the people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Are you okay in the head? Do you struggle with understanding and differentiating reality from fiction? Because putting this in a gaming article is horrendously inappropriate. I honestly recommend to the writer, and I recommend to Polygon, to actually delete this part. There is a bit of more context later on in the article, but drawing these parallels is no less than inappropriate. I'm sorry to say this. And a little Japanese lesson here. I'm gonna make some more videos probably in Japanese. You're gonna hear me bubbling. But this one, hibakusha, this is how it's written, yes. I didn't really look at the meaning of the word. I thought it's the he from fire, but then I remember it's written a little differently. The hibaku is, yes, suffering from an explosion. Hibakusha is a person suffering from an explosion, specifically here from a nuclear blast. That was the first thing I thought of. And this is how it's written. The first one is suffering. The second kanji is explosion. The last one, mono, this is person. Little kind of language lesson here. Probably gonna have more. I'm gonna be reacting to Dogen Sensei a little more in some upcoming videos. There will be a little more cheerful, but yeah. Thank you for sticking with me and listening to my rant. Kanshi shimasu. And I hope to see you in the next video. Mata ne!